Hi, my name is Lisa. This is my video submission for the documentary about um, pregnancy loss. I have two stories. I will share both with you if you want to listen to one or the other or both or do whatever you want with them. Um, I'm 27 years old. My husband is 28, and we got married almost 2 years ago. And 6 months after our wedding, we decided that we were going to try for a baby. And it happened right away. uh, yeah, it was about 6 months after we got married. So we were really excited. It was the first pregnancy for both of us. My best friend was 3 weeks ahead of me, and she went for her first ultrasound. And when they went there, they didn't find a heartbeat. And it surprised me so much. I wasn't expecting to hear her say that at all. Um, I didn't realize that it was so common. She told me that it was 1 in 4, and that just blew me away. But it always kind of happens to somebody else. It never happens to you. So it really didn't cross my mind that we would have any issues in our pregnancy. He's got nieces and nephews on his side. I have lots of nieces and nephews, and all healthy pregnancy, healthy babies. My sister-in-law had a miscarriage, an early miscarriage, and that was a few years before. But I guess we weren't really close enough at the time for me to really, I guess, get the gravity of the situation when it happened to her. And I remember when my best friend told me about what happened to them, I said to my husband, I know how excited we are about this baby and how much this pregnancy means to us. I couldn't imagine losing it at this point. It broke my heart. And, still didn't even consider that it would happen to us. And so we went to our first ultrasound at 8 weeks, 5 days. And there was a little baby, and there was a heartbeat, and we saw its little arm nub move. It was really cute. But there looked like there was a little bit of swelling in the belly, and so they wanted us to come back for a follow-up ultrasound. So after our honeymoon, 2 days later, we went on our honeymoon, and they wanted us to come back afterwards just to do a follow-up. They said, don't worry about anything. Everything looks good. We just want to make sure that it's progressing the way that we want it to. So we got back from our honeymoon. I was just about 12 weeks pregnant, and we were waiting. We were going to announce that week once we went to our ultrasound and got kind of cleared, because heard about waiting to announce until 12 weeks or whatever. So we went to our ultrasound, and the tech just searched and couldn't find a heartbeat, and that was it. They told us that there was no heartbeat and that we had lost the baby. It was a miscarriage. My body didn't recognize that the baby had died. While I was waiting to go in for a D&C, I miscarried naturally at 13 weeks at home. It was really traumatizing for me to go through what I did, especially at home, and kind of felt like I was alone, and nobody really knew what we were going through. We hadn't announced it. I felt really alone, and I found a lot of support around me and the women around me, going to grief counseling and things like that. But things were tense for a little while after the loss. About 4 months later, we decided that we were going to start trying again, and it took us 4 or 5 months to get pregnant, and then we did, and we were so excited about it because it was our rainbow baby, and which is a baby that's conceived after a loss, and we're just really excited. Went to the first ultrasound, things looked good. Went to the second ultrasound, things looked good. Then we announced it. The first trimester was awful. I was terrified all the time. I was constantly afraid of something happening, or eating the wrong thing, or doing the wrong thing, or not eating the right thing, or just everything and anything. But once we got past the first trimester, when I was at the point that I had lost the baby the first time, once I got past that point, I felt a lot more comfortable with the pregnancy, and it was kind of like smooth sailing after that. Uh, so I was 17 weeks pregnant, and it was Mother's Day, and I went out to my mom's car wash. She owns a car wash, and I was visiting with her, and I went to the washroom. And when I went to the washroom, I was spotting, and it instantly just terrified me. And went to emergency, and it was a small town, so they didn't have the ultrasound machine, and it was Mother's Day, so couldn't get in to go get an ultrasound. So they used a Doppler. They couldn't find the heartbeat, but I still felt the baby moving, or at least I thought I did. It was the first pregnancy that I had gotten far enough along that I was able to feel, baby moving and rolling around and kicks and stuff. And it was just the beginning of that because I was just 17 weeks. So went for an emergency ultrasound the next morning, and there was a heartbeat. And she was kicking and punching and rolling around and doing lots of stuff. And the only thing that they could see that didn't maybe look very good was that my amniotic fluid was really low. They didn't know why. It wasn't extremely low. It wasn't in the dangerous value. It was still within the acceptable range. So they didn't know where the bleeding was coming from. They couldn't figure it out. They thought it was just a friable cervix. So sent me home. My midwife had me on bed rest. The bleeding just kept on getting worse. We were at the high risk clinic now. We were going for ultrasounds. It was week after week, and then every 2 weeks. And every time that we went, the news just got worse. My fluid was lower. She still had a heartbeat. She was still moving around. She didn't have very much room. She started to slow down in growth a little bit. At 21 weeks, I woke up in the morning and there was a lot of blood. And I knew right away what happened. And my husband was working out of town at the time, so my mom took me to the hospital, and my midwife met me there, and they did a bedside ultrasound, and they looked for about 10 minutes trying to find the heartbeat. And when they had the ultrasound machine on my stomach and I saw my baby, and I knew where the heartbeat should be, and I knew it wasn't there. And they put on this, I don't know what it is, they put on this thing, and it brings up a line, and when there's a heartbeat, the line goes and it shows the heartbeat. And the line was flat. And as I said, I had a miscarriage before, and I've seen that. And I had said to the doctor, "You don't have to keep looking. I know what that means. I already know." And they felt really they were tiptoeing around it, and were afraid to see my reaction, and if I was just gonna completely fall apart. And so I had to schedule for the next day to deliver. So I got induced the next day at 11 a.m. and I went to the hospital 11 o'clock, and at 1 o'clock I finally got induced. At 3:30 I was in labor. By 4 o'clock I was in pretty good labor. Contractions were pretty close together. They did another induction, and at 8 o'clock at night, I delivered my daughter, Brooke. It was by far the hardest thing that I've ever had to do in my whole life. When I had my miscarriage, I remember talking to my mom, and she said to me one time, "Thank God that you didn't get further along in the pregnancy, because could you imagine how hard that would be if you had carried the baby longer?" And at the time I thought it was so heartless. It hurt me so much. I just felt like it was so not well thought out for her to say that. And it just came across, it just hurt me so much that, how could you think that just because if I would have carried the baby longer that I would have loved it any more or any less. And then I had a stillbirth, and the journey has been completely different this time around. And she was right. And it's not that my miscarriage wasn't really destroying to me, because it was, and I was brought down to my knees for the first time in my life like that. And but when I went through the stillbirth, it was a completely different level of loss. And that time around, I decided that I'm not keeping quiet about this. We had already announced that we were expecting, to everyone that we knew. It was on Facebook, social media. So I went on there and I posted that, it was with heavy hearts, and we had lost our daughter to stillbirth. And the amount of support that just poured in was phenomenal. The amount of people that said, you're so strong, you're so strong. And it was at a point in my life where I was anything but strong and felt anything but strong. I just wanted to talk about it. I just wanted someone to hear me, someone to acknowledge that we had a child, and I wasn't willing to hold it in anymore. I wasn't willing to be ashamed of it or afraid of it, because that is my life. That's what I've gone through in the last 2 years. That's what my husband and I have gone through. That's what our marriage has gone through. And if it makes people uncomfortable, then it makes people uncomfortable. It doesn't mean that it's any less true. And I had to plan my daughter's funeral, and I had to pick out a casket for her, and I had to sign a death certificate. Just because our child isn't here or our children aren't here doesn't mean that we're any less parents. It doesn't mean that I'm any less of a mom, or that my husband is any less of a dad. People think that if they bring it up, that, or say anything about it, that they're going to be reminding you of something that you don't think about on a daily basis. And what I say to those people when they say that is that you're not reminding me of anything that I don't already always think about. All you're doing is showing me that you remember that I have a daughter, that I have a son or daughter before that, and making their life real, which is really, really important to people in our situation. I get to go and see her at her grave every Sunday. It's been 3 months now since we lost our daughter Brooke, and a year since we lost the first baby. And I like to see her name on the plaque, because it marks that she has a place in this world, and that she was a human, and people see that. And people have been a lot more supportive, this time around than they were with the miscarriage. For some reason, they see stillbirth as more of a human than a miscarriage. Miscarriage is really disenfranchised. People don't see it for what it is, and it's really, disappointing and can be really devastating to someone who's going through a miscarriage and started planning their life around a baby, around the arrival of a baby, and then had all of those hopes and dreams just tore away in a blink of an eye. So I really just want people to not be ashamed of it, and not be afraid of it, and not be afraid to bring it up, and know that it's okay to say, tell me about your daughter, or tell me about your journey, or ask me about it, because it's such a big part of who I am now. I can't go back and be the person that I was before, because that person's just not there. And things just changed, and some things change you, and this is absolutely one of them. And I think it's really important for people to know that it doesn't happen to someone else. I don't have any loss on my side of the family, and my husband doesn't have any on his. So we had no reason to believe that we would ever have a miscarriage or a stillbirth, but we had both. And death doesn't show any prejudice. It's just random. And if it happens to you, then it just happens to you. And yeah, so with our first miscarriage, they chalked it up to chromosomal abnormalities, like they do with most early miscarriages or early losses, early pregnancy losses. The doctors say that 2 in a row, I think 3 is considered normal. It happens to 1 in 4 pregnancies. It happens to a lot of people, and it's something that rocks your world and changes a lot of things. So thank you guys for listening and hearing my story, and I really support this documentary, and I really support what you guys are spreading and the conversations that you're starting and the support that you're showing, because it really means a lot to me, my husband, everyone that I know that has gone through a situation like this. All we want is for people to be able to talk about it and be able to feel comfortable talking about it, and for it not to have such a stigma around it. Yeah. Thank you.